I think now is the time to basically start reevaluating from top to bottom, and that includes Dame. You know, whenever we come into the season, we're always excited. Remember when we did the League Pass rankings? We were like, there's not a single team that I don't want to watch.
Yeah.
And I think we all knew to some extent that might change as the season progressed. And it has, because there are certainly some teams that I am not particularly interested in watching. Not because they play a boring brand of basketball, because you know that they're playing on borrowed time. They're just organizations that need drastic changes.
Yeah, they're just frustrating watches, and that leads us right into the Portland Trailblazers, who, as we mentioned at the top of the show, fired Neil Olshey on Friday. There is the investigation into his conduct. Allegations arose. Basically, sounds like he was not a super fun guy to work for. The quote was concerns around workplace environment by non-player personnel at the practice facility. The Blazers did not release any specifics of the investigation, nor should they, but I know based on the reaction that I saw on Twitter yesterday from Blazers fans, Blazers writers, everyone seems pretty happy that Neil Olshey is gone, Morten. So we talked about the Blazers last time about, with Dame out, with Nasir Little out, at least temporarily, and I believe Anthony Simons got hurt on Thursday as well. Kind of questioning what their long-term plan is. Well, now they don't have a GM or a president of basketball operations. They have an interim general manager, Joe Cronin. So how does he sort through the mess that he is inheriting here?
That is a really good question. I think everything is open for business. It should be, at least, in my opinion. I think now is the time to basically start reevaluating from top to bottom, and that includes Dame. I mean, I understand that he's been off limits for so long since he got drafted, but now it's time. It's time to look through every possible option. Do you go into a full-on rebuild where everything must go? Do you just say, well, now that Olshey isn't here anymore, that frees us up to trade CJ McCollum and like Norman Powell, and then we still keep or retain Dame, and then we find other pieces around him? I don't know. That's something that remains to be seen. Personally, I'm probably leaning towards just blowing everything sky high. Just everything, and starting over, including a new coach.
Yeah, I mean, we talked last time about some of the kind of ancillary pieces like Robert Covington and Yusuf Nurkic, both of whom are free agents after this year. And we were saying, if you don't plan on re-signing those guys, you got to flip them for the deadline. Got to get something for them. You just can't afford to lose talent for nothing. But I agree. This forces a greater reevaluation of, what are the Blazers hoping to do here? And this will be a common theme for a couple teams that we'll discuss today. But without Dame, they go at home against the San Antonio Spurs on Thursday night and lose by 31 points. And this is a Spurs team that is 7-13 on the year, has not been super competitive against good teams. So, of course, without your best player, you're going to struggle more often than not. But that's a type of loss that makes you think, even if everyone is healthy and, I don't think even if they got what happened to Phoenix last year, where you drop all these teams in the playoffs and they're without one of their best players, I still don't think this Portland team could capitalize on that. So I think you're right. It does force a greater reevaluation. And, based on some of the quotes coming out from Chauncey Billups, Jason Quick had an article of The Athletic on Friday morning before Olshey was fired, and his article suggested that Olshey seemed safe, which we knew not to be true. But he also included some quotes from Chauncey, one of which really seemed to be placing a lot of blame on Olshey and this roster construction. He said, we give up size every night, man. We're a small group, especially at 1, 2, and 3. They're all pretty much 6'3", but you have to find a way to just make multiple efforts defensively. And, he's talking about basically his team effort. He's questioning their effort, which is also not a great sign. He said, my biggest concern at the moment is I want us to compete harder. I want us to be more competitive in every game, and I don't feel like every night we do that. So, not what you want to hear from a first-year head coach 20 games or 25 games into the season. So, Mort, I'm with you in thinking everything should be on the table, including a Dame trade. But I think, the priority heading into the trade deadline, given how much size you are giving up with a Dame CJ Powell backcourt, you got to move at least one of those three guys.
Agreed. But at the same time, I'm calling a little bit of BS on Chauncey overall, because he also has Larry Nance Jr., who is a very versatile, wing big, as we like to call them, who's playing less than 20 minutes per game after playing 31 last year. So if you were looking for some size or looking to counterweigh some of your size disadvantages, why aren't you playing Larry Nance at all? That doesn't make sense. That is a little bit more of a scapegoat thing, honestly. I just think you can't really go out and say, oh, we don't have size, if you're not playing arguably your best big man. That's not exactly something that I take a whole lot of seriousness in. But no, of course you need to break up one of the aforementioned trio. Like we talked about the last time around. They have 4 guards who are all high productive. Yeah, you need to either, if you want to stay competitive, let's say they don't want to rebuild, you have got to spread out the wealth a little bit more. If that's CJ going for a wing or a big, okay. If it's Norm going for a wing or a big, fine. Just make sure that you spread that out a little bit, because Anthony Simons can come in and give you shots off the bench and kind of replace a little bit of what Norm or CJ gives you. Not to the full extent, I'm well aware, but he can. He's a shooter. He's a guy who can go get buckets when he's healthy. So yeah, of course. I mean, that was always the problem there, was that they were always very good at getting guys in the draft for guards, because remember, they didn't get Norman Powell, they got Gary Trent, who they then sent off for Norman Powell. So they drafted well when it came to guards. They just didn't really draft well when it came to wings or bigs or whatever. So now they need to find out to plug those holes via trades.
Yeah, again, the good thing. Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead. I was going to say the good thing for Portland is that, because Covington and Nurkic aren't expiring deals, you don't have to, if you trade CJ or you trade Powell, or even if you trade Dame, it's not like you have to say, okay, well, who can fit next to Nurkic long term? You don't give a damn, right? Neither one of those guys is in the long-term plan, most likely. So it's, okay, regardless of which one of these guys we trade, let's say we trade CJ. All right, we've got Dame and Norm now as our 1 and our 2. And then just figure out, what are you prioritizing in a trade? If you are Joe Cronin or whoever takes over the full-time GM job, what would you want in return for one of these guys? Is there a certain positional archetype that you would be trying to target, or is it just best player available?
So this is under the assumption that they don't want to rebuild, right? So what you kind of want is, I think, honestly, I realize that I'm going offense again here, but they need a wing who can handle the ball. That's been a problem. I mean, we saw that Robert Covington's more of a big than a wing, because he really can't dribble the basketball, especially into a crowd. That's not his style. They need someone who is 6'7", 6'8", who can take the ball in his hands, break down defenses, get into the teeth of the defense, and create plays. Now, of course, those guys who can do that, who are that size, they're extremely valuable. So you're not going to find that for a CJ. So maybe you just create a major package if that's the way you want to go into it. And people will point out, oh, Ben Simmons is tall and he can dribble. Yeah, that's not what I'm arguing. I'm saying someone who can get into the teeth of the defense and actually shoot. So it's really tough. And because when I see those components that they have in Portland, if you're trading a win now player, which CJ is, for another win now player, that's going to diminish the list around the league. Who is interested in doing that? If a team out there is willing to take on CJ it's because they want to win now, but they don't want to relinquish one of their own win now guys. They want to relinquish some of their youth instead to go all in. So that's really the problem by going into one of those retooling processes once in a while when you want to win, but you have guys in their primes that you want to send out. It's actually a little bit difficult to find a package or a taker because that doesn't really align on the interest level, which is why I think ultimately speaking, the best solution here is to blow everything sky high. Nuke the ever-living hell out of this roster. Everything from top to bottom. Everything must go.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at their long-term sheet, Covington, Nurkic, unrestricted free agents next summer. Anthony Simons, restricted free agent next summer. The only guys they have under guaranteed contract beyond the 22-23 season are Lillard, McCollum, and Powell, because Larry Nance Jr. becomes an unrestricted free agent 2023. Nasir Little becomes a restricted free agent. And if you've got Dame, CJ, and Norm, are you really paying up to retain Anthony Simons next summer? Probably not. So, all the guys they signed, Ben McLemore, Tony Snell, Cody Zeller, all are on 1-year minimum deals. Like, they just don't have much left in the tank here. Like, the Zach Collins thing did not pan out for them. That was one of their big whiffs in recent years. So there's not a ton of promising young talent in the pipeline that you can say, okay, even if we do blow this thing up, at least we've got something to hold on to. So, I think that's probably even more reason to, if there is not much reason to try to tread water. Like, even if you trade CJ or trade Dame, it's going to be very hard for them to maintain a 45-50 win ceiling, potentially get into the first round, second round of the playoffs.
Right.
I fear that this thing is so far gone that there's no going back, but I do want to, I have two CJ specific trade ideas, neither of which involve Ben Simmons, because that has been discussed by everyone for the last 6 months. One of which we'll get to in a second because it's the next team that we need to hit. The other, this has come up a lot on Sixers Twitter because, once again, the Sixers fans are completely out on Tobias Harris. So something around CJ for Tobias Harris. I don't think it would be a straight up deal, but let's say that's the main piece of it. CJ McCollum to Philly, Tobias Harris to Portland. Would that help solve any of these problems that we're discussing?
Am I to understand that as Tobias Harris and Ben Simmons having equal trade value?
I don't know. I hope not.
Sure. I mean, look, it would balance the roster a little bit better for Portland for sure. Does it make them substantially better? I don't know. I mean, I will say it probably puts them up a little level just because now you have scoring from all over. But do you trust that roster in the playoffs? I don't know.
Nope.
No, right? I mean, okay, so let's play it out. Let's say Chauncey actually gets wise and starts playing Larry Nance a little bit more.
Right.
Because again, he's probably your best. Hell, I want to say it. He's your best big, and I like Yusuf Nurkic, but Nance, the passing, the defense, the ball handling, the versatility, I just think that's better. But let's say you slide him in at the 4 next to Yusuf Nurkic. That forces Tobias Harris into a 3-man role, which he really hasn't played in years.
Right.
But okay, I guess it's fine. And then you have Norm at the 2, Dame at the 1. That's interesting. You could also go in a totally different direction than say, you know what, Yusuf Nurkic, you just go to the bench. And it's Larry Nance at the 5. Robert Covington slides down to the 3, and then you have Tobias taking on the 4 role. That might be more intriguing to me because that should be a versatile lineup where you can really do some damage. I think part of the problem for Portland for so many years is they've had very few multi-positional players, Brian. Dame is a guard, CJ is a guard. They haven't really had that quote-unquote guard forward who can really swing up. Well, they did, but they traded him for Norman Powell. I mean, Gary Trent was actually a guy who could have done that, a little bit of that. But Norm is like, I know he's being used as a 3 and as like a traditional wing, but like he's a guard.
Yeah, he's like
he
6'3", right?
Yeah, he's 6'3". I mean, there are limits. I understand that right now in Chicago we're seeing Alex Caruso like guard Julius Randle and stuff like that, but like that's not Norm. That's not his game. He's an offensive-minded player. So you need some versatility that they don't have right now. Some positional versatility. Getting Tobias, who's a forward, I would say more of a 4 than a 3, but he's forward.
Mm-hmm.
And hell, you could probably even get away with playing Tobias as a small ball center in like super small, short stretches here and there. Because, I know defensively that would be bad, but
yeah.
My point is, you just need more positional flexibility. I mean, they were so pigeonholed, and they have been pigeonholed for years. So getting someone in there who can actually switch around, I think that would behoove them. But again,
that was the appeal of Larry Nance Jr. in theory.
Yeah,
was the additional versatility that they've lacked in recent years, and I agree.
It needn't be in theory only; it should work in practice as well. It's just Chauncey Billups isn't playing his ass.
Yeah, well, he's started to. He's come around to it recently, but
right, but not enough, man.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think you can a Dame, Norm, Tobias, Covington, Nance, or even Little, Tobias, and Nance. Like, there's some intrigue there, but again, are you just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic? Is that going anywhere? I don't think so. So I think ultimately you're going to end up seeing both of those guys go, CJ and Dame. But the one thing I will note before we move on here is that, Olshey was the one who drafted CJ. He was, by all accounts, extremely, extremely high on CJ, perhaps to the point of overvaluing him. So I think his dismissal does at least open the door to, a greater likelihood of CJ being traded by the deadline this year. I don't think it was going to happen if Olshey stayed.
Right.
Now I think it's probably 50-50.
I mean, so CJ has never been bad. I mean, ever since he started breaking out in his 3rd year and up until now, that's been over 450 games, and he's averaging 22 per game. Mm-hmm. And hitting over 2.5 threes on almost 40%. So, I mean, the guy clearly has been good, especially getting picked at 10th. So I understand the idea of retaining him, but Olshey comes with a track record when it comes to doubling down on draft. I don't want to say blunders because CJ wasn't a blunder, but like, let's take Myers Leonard, for example. Like, that was not a good draft pick. And then he extended him because that was his guy. That was his selection. Or you just kind of go, why? Like, I think he gave him, was it 41 million back in the dreadful 2016 summer?
Sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, why? Because he didn't want to lose face. That was it. That was the reason. He didn't want to lose face. Okay. You can't have a general manager thinking that way. You just can't.
Yep.
And you have had offers on the table for CJ over the years that you've turned down that might now look really good. That's a problem. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. CJ is now more fair game than he was before, but I don't want that to be used as some sort of excuse for downplaying CJ's abilities because he's been good.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, if he's actually obtainable, he's going to be one of the best names likely to be moved ahead of the trade deadline.
I agree.